And my colleague Shafiq leads on the community's all aspects of community safety for Kent County Council. Our plan for this afternoon is Shafiq's going to do a short presentation or conversation around the role of the wardens, and then I'm going to do a little bit on how, if you want to, you can get involved in either sponsoring a KCC warden or in employing your own if that's your preferred route of action. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Shafiq, if I may.
Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. I can see some of you have put your cameras on, which is really nice. I've got some faces to talk to. I'm apologising for my croaky voice because I'm just recovering from a rather nasty bout of the flu. So if I start coughing halfway through, I apologise for that. As Mark has mentioned, I'm Shafiq Peerbutts. I'm the head of community safety for Kent County Council, and the community warden service comes under my remit. Now, I am conscious that we might have a mixture of people in the audience today, from those of you that might know the community service really well, and maybe those that haven't had a warden in their area before but are interested. So let me give you a little bit about their role before we go on to the sponsorship element. So the community warden service has been around for about, or just over 20 years now, albeit that we did have more wardens at one point. But the community warden is a uniform role. It was initially brought in to complement the police service and work alongside our policing partners. The sight of a community warden can bring a real sense of reassurance to people in the community, providing that really familiar and trusted face and that reassuring presence. But they do a lot more than that. So over the past few years, they have provided vital assistance during emergencies such as flooding, coastal erosion, and of course, during the pandemic, they were supporting those that were vulnerable and shielding from the virus. The community... Oh, sorry, I think somebody was off mute there. The wardens will work and talk with anyone in your communities, from the very young right through to those that are unfortunately receiving end-of-life care. I primarily work to 4 objectives: strengthen and improve community resilience, support the elderly and vulnerable, foster community cohesion and well-being, and lastly, they do kind of assist people in navigating community and support services. So it's not kind of uncommon to see your community warden going into kind of local shops, providing local schools, local shops, local businesses. When they do go into schools, they provide talks on road safety, drug and alcohol awareness, or they support projects such as the kind of Restart a Heart campaign that some of you may have heard about, when they help to teach primary age children some vital skills they could use in kind of helping a loved one whilst they wait for an ambulance. You might also see a warden at a local lunch club in your community, where they'll be engaging with your residents, delivering scam awareness talks, or just kind of helping people to navigate the complexity of the services or support agencies that a person or an individual may require. You might even find them working with local people to set up clubs. So if there's a gap that's been identified in the community, they might help to set up a dementia-friendly cafe or even an arts club where people can kind of come together, share their stories. Something that's really important in promoting kind of community spirit, but also vital in people's mental health and well-being. We've got some really good kind of examples of where wardens have worked with parish councils to address local issues and have secured and utilised funding to make a real difference. Just a couple of quick examples for you. So we've got one warden who was asked by their parish council to assist in identifying those that were in need or were facing kind of and experiencing financial difficulties during the financial crisis and difficult times that we live in. Parish council purchased a number of £25 supermarket vouchers to kind of help those families until they could be signposted to further support, and they use those for kind of food or clothing or gas or electrics. It was really difficult for the parish council because they couldn't really identify those that would need it the most, but the warden could really help in this area. So the warden, because of their knowledge and the understanding of the community and the people they work with, they were able to identify and provide those vouchers to those that kind of required the support, and helping them to purchase kind of the food or school uniforms for their children. And what they did was they were able to link those people then into kind of the relevant agencies for further financial support, and into local food banks or the local district and borough council. The feedback that came back from those individuals was overwhelming. They really expressed a strong sense of kind of relief and gratitude to both the warden and the parish council, that they'd recognised their kind of struggles and had supported them. And they'd also been kind of relieved that somebody was recognising their plight. Another example, wider community kind of engagement, where the warden had worked alongside a parish council, engaging with children and young people at a popular event they held annually. And the wardens attended, and they asked them to run kind of a safety-related quiz for them and help educate them on certain issues. And the parish council had kind of purchased a number of footballs and other little prizes that were given away as a result of that kind of quiz. A really successful day, and there was a record number of kind of families that attended. So the warden themselves will work with a multitude of kind of agencies in partnership with them. And they primarily do that to improve quality of life for your residents or your communities. And whilst they haven't got specific enforcement powers, if there are kind of any genuine issues that they need to address, or you've identified, they'll work with the relevant authorities on finding a solution or directly providing support to those that are in need. So that was a really quick kind of whistle-stop tour as to what a warden might do. Mark, I could talk about the wardens all day pretty much. So I'm going to leave it there if that's okay. I'm happy to pick up any questions as we go through, but I'll let you pick up the sponsorship element.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shafiq. And yes, I know that you're very passionate about the warden service, as am I. And we know and we understand that actually pretty much every community in Kent has some need that a warden could address. We are restricted in terms of the amount of budget that we have, and therefore the amount of wardens that we can employ. And therefore, as a result of the situation that we're now in and the size of the service that we have, one of the undertakings that we gave is that the service would be designed in such a way that should there be others who wish to fund a warden in their area, we could expand our service to accommodate that. So that's the basis upon which we've prepared our models in terms of how those wardens could be funded externally. We've spoken to several different types of organisations about how to do that. Parish and local councils, it is fair to say, are the ones who have expressed the most interest so far, but we have spoken to other organisations in the community as well, including people like housing associations and the like. The two models that we have developed in terms of how a warden could be funded are summarised probably in the best way of saying it's the model where funding would pay for a KCC warden, or it's a model where a parish or local council could employ their own warden. And we are aware that a couple of local councils have done that, employed their own warden. And we are also at a very advanced stage with a couple of local councils in terms of paying for a KCC warden. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both models, it's fair to say. And what's the most attractive model may well depend on the circumstances of the individual council. In terms of the model where funding would pay for a KCC warden, the situation with that is that the service in effect wouldn't change. The warden would be a KCC warden, they'd be KCC uniformed, they would still be accredited in terms of our community safety accreditation with Kent Police. They would still have full access to all of the data that they currently have access to, which is an advantage, certainly when they're supporting people in vulnerable situations in your community, that they can have details of all of the information that's available to them as KCC employees. We, KCC, would continue to provide all of their management, all of their responsibility for health and safety, and effectively the service wouldn't change from that which is on offer now. It's just that it would be funded in a slightly different way. The alternative model is that a parish or local council could employ their own warden, and as I say, we're aware of a couple that have. In those kind of circumstances, it is really for the parish in those circumstances to take the management lead in terms of providing management, supervision, health and safety, and everything that goes alongside that. We, as KCC, are happy to support parishes, and in fact, one of the organisations that has developed its own and employed its own warden, we've provided them with support in terms of sharing some of the risk assessments that we'd already undertaken for community wardens, so that they didn't have to start from scratch, and some of the kind of work planning and some of the methods that our wardens use and their systems, so that particular parish could take those documents, amend them for their own local circumstances, but not have to start with a blank sheet of paper in a circumstance where they may not have had, for example, a risk assessment for lone working or for out of hours working or from something of that kind of nature. Our overriding consideration in this is that if there is a way of putting more community wardens or similar type officers into the communities, and there's a way that we can support that, we're very keen to do so. I always get asked a certain number of questions, and there is a frequently asked questions document which I'm hoping I can ask Charmaine to circulate after this meeting if you haven't already seen it as a parish or local council. All of the questions that we're commonly asked are in there. The kind of big ones, I suppose, that are likely to come up this afternoon are some of the ones that I've already covered in terms of who's responsible for what. The big question is always how much and what that figure has to pay for, in effect. So from a KCC perspective, the figure, we have to do everything on what's called a full cost recovery basis. So the cost of a warden isn't just their salary. It will include their kind of employment on costs in terms of things like their pension and national insurance. It will include their uniform and transport arrangements and training and a contribution towards the person who has to line manage that person. And the figure we have for this financial year for a full-time member of staff is £45,000 to cover all of that. That's a 5-day-a-week member of staff. What we have worked out in terms of practicalities is that we don't have to have all of our wardens working in the same area for 5 days a week. And in fact, many of the conversations that we're having now with parish and local councils are for wardens to be partially based in their communities. Now, it is fair to say, and Shafiq will leap in and stop me if I've got this wrong, but our community wardens work best when they know their communities really well. And the longer they're in the community every week, the better they can understand the community, the issues in the community, and get to know the people that they're supporting and the people they need to interact with. So our favoured model is that they are in that community for ideally at least 2 or 3 days a week, but we are talking to a couple of parishes who want them there for 1 day a week, and that's about the minimum that we think is possible in terms of the community warden actually adding any value to the community and meeting any of the need that the community will have. But it is fair to say that the longer they're in a community each week, the more embedded they become, the more well known and well trusted they become by those in the community, and to be fair, the more impact they can have in those situations. My intention this afternoon wasn't really to speak at you for long periods of time, but actually to kind of set the scene, as I hope that we've done between us, and then leave the vast majority of the time for any questions that you wanted to ask, because Shafiq and I have spoken beforehand, as you would imagine, and it really is, we can't really guess what you want to know from this meeting. So hopefully we've set the scene, but I'll be really keen to hear from you in terms of any questions you might have or any suggestions that you might have for how we can improve this service. Just in concluding, what I would say is our driver as officers in KCC is to work with you. Our wardens, we believe, are trusted members of your community, and that's how we would like you to view the service. So there are no questions which are silly questions. There is, if there is a way of making something happen between working with you and us to deliver this service in your community, then we're committed to trying to find a way of making it happen practically. There may be some things that can't be delivered, but I don't think we've come across any yet. The full drive here is not whether we can do this, but how we can do this, working together and trusting each other to a great extent in how we work and put a warden into your community. I can see there's been quite a lot going into the chat. Charmaine, I have to confess I haven't been monitoring it while I've been talking. But as I say, I'm very happy to answer any questions. How do you want to manage the question and answer bit, Charmaine? What's the easiest way to do
I think
that?
if they put their hands up, be the best way to do it. So to raise your hands, it changes all the time in Zoom. It is under reactions, it should be. Doesn't come up for me because I'm hosting. So if you just have a quick look to make sure you can raise your hand, it should be under reactions. Okay, perfect. We've got a couple. If you can't raise your hand, just come off mute and we will still obviously take your questions. So if we go to Anne first. Sorry if I'm doing this out of order. It doesn't put the order of it like Teams does.
Oh, right. Never mind. I was wondering, because you said that for a community warden, the minimum time that they can spend is at least a minimum of a day in a community. What does he do during that day to spend within the community to be efficient? You talked about that.
Yeah, sure. The actual role and what the wardens do, I'm going to hand that one over, and he's going to duck when I do it to Shafiq because he knows the service much better from a practical point of view than I do. Shafiq, you happy to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I am. So yeah, in terms of what a community warden might do, I outlined some of the activities they might do in my intro. But so what they might do on a typical day is, if they were kind of sponsored for a day working in your community, they would go in probably to the parish council to find out what's been happening over the course of the week, see if there's any particular issues that they might need to pick up. They might have people, excuse me, sorry. They might have people within the community that are particularly in need or are vulnerable that they might go and pay a visit to. Hopefully in time, they would be in a position where they would have helped to establish and set up some clubs for local residents that they could pop into and provide some support and advice. We do a lot of work in terms of crime prevention and providing, that guidance for people. We know things like, and Mark will know this because it covers one of his other areas, that people are sadly falling victim to scams and fraud. So the wardens do a lot of preventative work around that as well. So there's a variety of activities that the warden would do in that day. There is also the aspect of the warden getting to know the community. So if it was a new area that they were working in, it would take them some time to kind of embed themselves within that and get to know the key players, but also for people to kind of come forward and identify the fact that they might need support and they might have been struggling but haven't been able to identify where to get that support from agencies. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you very much.
Brilliant. If we go to Karen next.
Sorry, I was having issues. We're thinking about it. We're thinking about incorporating part of the role of a community warden into our existing staff because we're opening up a community hub. Will we be able to get some kind of service level agreement with Kent County so that we have access to the information that they already hold for our residents in Snodland? That was my first question. Secondly, would they then be involved with I'll come back to the second question because I've forgotten the name of the company. And is there a job specification that you can offer us and a job description that we could use to model this part role on?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. I'll pick up the last question first. I will answer them all, but I'll pick up the last question first, which is the job description and spec. And yes, absolutely. if we've got documentation that would help you putting something like our community wardens into your community, then we're more than happy to share that for you to, use it as it is, change it, make it more adaptive for your community, whatever works for you. We're happy to help. Access to, so service level agreement was your other question. There's two sort of broad aspects to that. One of the things we have said is that any directly employed wardens could have access to the same training that we provide to our wardens. We would have to make a charge for that if they weren't our staff, but it would be a cost recovery. KCC doesn't make a profit. That's not what we're here for. So we can provide a service level agreement which would give access to that kind of training and support. Access to information will depend on, so that your council, Snodland, I think you said you were from,
right.
will need to enter into a information sharing agreement with the county council, sharing personal information, particularly around if there are kind of vulnerable members of the community that would need the support of the warden or whatever you're going to call this officer. Then that would need to be managed through a information sharing agreement, because, as I'm sure you appreciate, there are all sorts of restrictions on sharing personal information, particularly in relation to vulnerable people. So there are lots of organisations that have those information sharing agreements already. There is, I believe, a kind of a health-based sort of county-wide umbrella set up for that. I don't know very much about it because we've not been involved in it previously, but that would have to sit as a kind of standalone kind of agreement between the county council and your community or your organisation. Nothing in there should be beyond the wit of reasonable people to arrange. And certainly if there's anything that we can do as you drive that role forwards, then we would be very happy to support you if you would like some support from us.
Okay. And sorry, finally, the last question, which I've just remembered. Currently, the community wardens have access and they go to the CSU meetings if we employed someone, would they still be able to go to those meetings?
So the community safety units are not run by us. So I can't sit here and say for definite one way or the other. What I can say is I'd be really surprised if they were to exclude somebody who's doing that kind of role in a community in your area. They may want their own kind of information sharing agreement because they do discuss things which are of quite a sensitive nature, as I'm sure you can imagine. But it would be for the local community safety unit to make that decision, and that's not one that we can make for them, I'm afraid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
If we go to Tracy next. Sorry, you're still muted, Tracy.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm here, Parish Councillor for Bean Parish. I'm here to represent the fact that we lost our community warden last year. My question is, as you have a community warden specified in other areas of that area in North Kent, so we have Darenth, we have Sutton at Home, and we have Newbarn. But unfortunately, Bean lost their community warden, who was an influential part of our community. So I'd like to ask if there'd be a possibility in reviewing that position that was a great need, which included crime prevention, fly tipping. We do have a lot of high risk crime within the area as it's an access point to the A2. And we're having fly tipping problems at the moment, which community safety with Dartford Borough Council is very, very aware of. But I would also ask them, the two gentlemen, to look at reviewing the Bean Parish area, and would it be beneficial as KCC, Kent County Council, would sponsor a warden for that area? Thank you.
Tracy, I'll ask them to come back to you separately on this, because this is just for the sponsoring. So we'll get a response, but we can't do it as part of this session. Is that okay, Shafiq?
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, if we go next to Bolton Parish Council.
Hi there. I'm the clerk for the council, and we had a warden about 10 years ago, and we lost our warden. There's a possibility that my council and neighbouring parishes may be interested in sponsoring a warden. One is, my questions are basically, would we be able to get one via KCC? And the second is, if we had to sponsor it alone, is there any requirement on the sort of 1 day a week thing? If it was shared between 3 councils, would that mean a warden had to do 3 days a week, or 1 day split across 3 councils or 3 parishes? If that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. And what I would say is that the 1 day a week really is 1 day in a community. So if you're talking about 3 parishes, we would really be looking at 1 day in each of the 3, so 3 days a week in total. It would vary depending on the size of the parish, because I know there are, quite a big difference in terms of some parishes and what that need might actually be. What I would say is, if you're in that position and you've got a couple of local parishes who are also having those conversations, get in touch with us and let's all meet and have a conversation about, what's the most sensible thing that we can make happen to try and support your communities. Because every situation that you're kind of describing is slightly different. So the best way forward probably is for either me or Shafiq to meet with you and your colleague parishes, so that we can sort of discuss the art of the possible, if you like.
Okay, and can I also just add into that, as a question as well, if you look to sponsor a warden, do they require an indoor base as such? Because we're rural parishes and we don't have a parish office, any of us, the parishes I'm referring to, not generically.
Sure.
How do they host a surgery? Do you have to have hire your village hall for a morning or something like that? How does it work?
I'm going to hand that one over to Shafiq, if I may.
Yeah, that's fine, Mark. So, so that's an interesting query, particularly in the rural areas. So the wardens do require some kind of a base. So as you can imagine, they're lone workers, they're out in the community. They will need somewhere where they can kind of stop off, use facilities, make themselves a drink and stuff. But also, as you say, kind of hosting clubs and stuff. If the parishes, if you don't have kind of areas where they can do that, then the warden can explore alternative options. But it does make it difficult if they're working across 3 parishes and there is nowhere in particular where they can do that kind of thing. So it is something that is kind of a basic sort of requirement for their health and safety and their support, that we have somewhere for them to base themselves. But again, as we've moved into kind of areas, there have been other communities or other services that have kind of stepped forward and offered the wardens a base. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the parish council, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And dare I ask, is a base allowed to be a pub?
Is a base allowed to be a pub?
It sounds silly, but obviously in rural places,
that's a really good
pub is generally the place that's going to be open. During the daytime.
That's a really good question. At the moment, we have no wardens who have a base as a pub. That isn't to say if that was the only option in that community and it was a bit of a hub, then it couldn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Mark here because he's my boss. So I don't think there would be a particular issue with that, if it's the only area that the warden can kind of come to. But also if the pub's receptive to kind of hosting community kind of clubs and stuff for people to come along and meet and greet, and for the warden to kind of share information with them, then I don't see why not. That's not possible. That isn't a possibility. I mean,
okay. Thank you for answering my slightly random question.
As long as they don't drink on the job, obviously.
No, they're just an essential part of a community sometimes when you're a small community. So thank you.
Okay, if we go to Pat next.
Oh, hi, yeah, thank you. I've lost me now. There we are. Everybody moves around all the time. So I was just going to say, you really emphasised the need for the community wardens to know the area that they're working in. And we are keen to sponsor a community warden. We've consulted with our residents and they've agreed to pay a lot more council tax so that we can do that. But what are the chances of having our original community warden back? Because obviously she worked with us for about 20 years and knows the area very well. And it would seem really rather pointless to have a new person in for 1 day a week when we have somebody who knows us so well. Is that a possibility?
So, Pat, do you mind me asking which area are you from?
Vigo.
Yeah, no problem. So what I would say is, again, as I said earlier, let's have a conversation offline. We have spoken to some parishes where we have managed to make that happen.
Right.
And we do fully understand that, relationships have been built over a long period of time. I think you said 20 years in the case of
Well, from the very beginning, I think.
Yeah. So to a certain extent, if we can make that happen, we will. The warden themselves will be part of that conversation, because we wouldn't want them to force them into something which they would be opposed to, because it wouldn't work well anyway. I suspect that wouldn't be the case, but I do just have to say it because it is right that we involve the warden themselves in those conversations.
Of course.
But what you suggest makes perfect sense if the warden knows your area well. So if I may be so bold as to suggest perhaps we could have a conversation outside of this meeting and see if you are supportive of funding a warden for a period of time in your community, then again how we can make that happen so that it works best for everybody.
Okay, thank you. So a telephone conversation or email or what? We've got our clerk here as well, so she'll know. She'll take on me.
If you wouldn't mind, so we've put the generic email address into the chat. Drop us an email to that with how it's best to contact you, and I'll make contact.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
If we go to Clark next. You're muted.
Hi, sorry, I didn't realise it just said Clark. I'm Angela from Yalding. I think my question was very similar to the Clark from Bolton, really. It's going to be really difficult for smaller parishes to even afford a warden for 1 day a week, because my maths makes that about £9,000. And most of us clerks work part-time. It's really inefficient to work in one area 1 day a week, because by the time you've got set up and everything, it's much more efficient to work in a cluster. So I guess I was supporting the Bolton lady, that I think that if we could come to some agreement where we worked in a cluster, then it wouldn't necessarily be 1 whole day a week. It might be the equivalent of 7.5 hours that you pay for, but they work much more efficiently. So I think I'm saying the same, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think Andrew, it sounds very similar to the question from Bolton a few moments ago, and again my response would be, if you've got parishes in your area that want to have that conversation, we would be very happy to join that conversation and work out with you how something which is sensible for everyone and efficient could be delivered to support your community.
Thank you.
Dolly?
Hello there. Sorry, my internet signal's not very good. Do apologise. That's why I haven't got my camera on. I've got a number of questions. I'm really quite concerned about this model. This obviously wasn't discussed at KCC's last budget meeting. So from my perspective, I feel residents have already paid for this service. So I was quite disturbed to hear that community wardens were being lifted out of areas, especially in areas of most deprivation, where community wardens actually saved KCC money and other agencies like the police, like the NHS, all sorts of other things, saved you money day in, day out. And now, not only have residents paid for them once, KCC are coming back with a model that is asking residents to pay for it twice. And not only that, we're seeing parishes that have got very much smaller precept levels actually considering the fact that they can't afford it, which means that we are giving services to the rich and leaving out the poor just because they happen to live in a different area. Now, I am really concerned that KCC are using this as a funding game, because at £9,000, that is actually more than one of my area's precepts altogether. So I've yet to see how this is a fair distribution of council tax already paid by members of the public, to be honest with you. Why parishes and towns are being asked to pay twice, and what are you going to do about those areas that are not going to be able to afford this at all? Bearing in mind, the reason that community wardens were set up was interagency work. That's not going to happen on a 1 day a week basis, especially if they're not based in an area where other agencies work, like out of local libraries or out of local police stations, which is where they should be. And also, the effectiveness of the model is quite surreal. What your first example said was, well, actually, community wardens will be able to do a data sharing agreement. There's already a data sharing agreement in place, with wardens picking up that work and making it available to KCC, because that's who's responsible for doing this work, not towns or parishes. So towns and parishes will have to fund that data sharing agreement and the officer hours to do that. And then, if that's the only benefit, wouldn't it be better for towns and parishes to go out, find their own contracts for this work, rather than work with KCC? Sorry, a lot of questions. Do apologise.
We'll get an answer to that circulated. Again, it's not. This is all about just sponsoring. I have put in the chat that I will circulate the gap policy, which is how they allocated and how they weighted each of those needs. So I'll circulate that, and we will get a response to you, Dolly. But just that this isn't the meaning of this meeting. So we'll get something to you, but it's just not for discussion in this meeting. Jen?
Hello. I'm also from Vigo Parish Council. I'm the clerk, and you've already spoken to Pat, and I was staying quiet to see if Pat telepathically read my mind to see what I was going to say. I've got a question, but I just wanted to start by saying our warden has been with us for 20 years and she is fantastic. And we're actually the parish that Shafiq was talking about, where she distributed our vouchers for us. And we could not have done that without her. She's given out electric blankets, she's given out vouchers to people that needed school uniform. And these are people with 800 properties that I don't know and that she knows. She's absolutely invaluable to us. And unfortunately, she's been taken away from our rural community and she's now placed in our neighbouring community, which is urban, and they've never had a warden before. So it's really galling for us that we've lost her. I'm really pleased to hear that Mark thinks that we might be able to retain her. We did do a survey, as Pat said, and we had a huge response with people saying that they wanted to keep her, but specifically they wanted to keep her, not they wanted to keep a warden, they wanted to keep her. And we have put our council tax up to reflect the £9,000 that we need to find. But you've removed her mid-year. This is my question. You've removed her mid-year. We can't fund that now until the 1st of April. We just don't have the reserves to do it. We don't have the budget to do it. And we've got a big gap. We've already missed her since December. I've already had people on my office door saying, I need this, I need that. And I don't have the capacity to deal with that, the knowledge to deal with that. And we've missed her so much already with referrals that I would normally put her way. I would hate to think that we've got to go right through to the 1st of April still. And then she'll be coming back and she'll almost be catching up on 4 months worth of referrals that she's not been able to do because she's not been here. So is there anything we could do to get her back earlier, even if we haven't got the budget? Which is a cheeky question, I know.
I love a cheeky question, Joseph. Please don't worry about it. I think I said I've slightly lost track of who I've said what to now, but I think, as I said to your colleague, let's have a conversation about how we can make it work for your community. Yeah. So I'm not in this meeting, but let's have a conversation soon. This week, if we can arrange it, about if you're committed to being able to fund her for a day a week, let's have a conversation quickly about what arrangements we need to put in place and how quickly we can do that.
Brilliant, thank you.
One thing I should just mention though is I know, and it's a point that's been made more than once, in this meeting is about the value that you have to the wardens that you already have and know, those of you that have them. And we really get that. We really understand they've built all those relationships. My only sort of caveat to that is that wardens can leave at any time for any reason to move on. So there is always a risk that, you know, a warden that's known, trusted and loved in the community may not be there going forwards. But
that's their choice, isn't it? As
absolutely,
opposed to at the moment, we feel like I don't mean to be dramatic, but we feel like she's been ripped away from us.
No, I understand. I just wanted to make the point that actually, you know, although your wardens are well known, and yours clearly, Joe, is very well known and well appreciated in your community. If at any point a warden left, the replacement warden would very soon develop all that kind of trust. But I do understand the issue around relationships that were already built.
Thank you.
Tracy, could I just ask, is yours a legacy hand? And yours, Angela, are they both legacy, just so that I can keep on top of who?
What do you mean by that? Sorry?
Oh, you still have your hand up. Is it from the previous question?
Taking it off. I didn't have
That's
to take
okay.
it.
I'll do it. I just didn't want to stop you from asking another question if you had one. Is it the same with you, Angela? Angela, I'll lower yours, and if you have got a question, put it back up again and I'll bring you back in. So if we go to Jen from Otford next.
Charmaine, you're on mute.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was just saying, Jen, that we can't hear you. You're not muted though, so it might be that the sound's just not working. So it might be worth going off and coming back into Zoom to see if that helps. If we go to, no, it's not your name, but named parish, and then we'll bring Jen back in when her sound's working.
So I'm Paula, I'm the parish clerk from Longfield and Newbarn Parish Council. Just an update, we was in the same situation, I think, as Bean and some of the others. We did have a warden in the community, and she'd worked very hard to build relationships within that community. And obviously when the restructure went through, we got the information to just say we wouldn't be having a warden. Although there was information shared, both myself and I think all of our councillors couldn't really put head nor tails to it as to how it wasn't very user friendly to say why that decision was made. So that's just my first point. And with my second question is with regards to around the £9,000. So I'm assuming that would be £9,000 to fund a warden for one full day for a year. Is that correct? Okay. Around that question, obviously, I think it's similar to some of the others. If there was to be a consideration by our parish, I think the preferred route would be to have our existing warden back, as she'd worked so hard within that community and built the the relationships with the members of the community. And as I think Mark and Shafik said, that is one key point that helps with their work, and that's what we found worked really well. Previously, within her role, I know she wasn't particularly in our area for a whole day, so would that be able to be shared, a whole day, I don't know, a working day of 7.5 hours, would that be able to be split, across maybe 2 mornings or 1 morning, 1 afternoon? And would that be flexible around the warden's current arrangement, because they've been taken off and they've been actually reassigned other areas? So, I mean, if our council was able to consider it, I think obviously that would have to be a question to the warden. If she's been reassigned, would that fit with their current workload?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, the sort of if I might say, the nuts and bolts kind of how we would make something work is something that we would have a conversation with each parish when they know that they're able to support one. So the principle is, if we can make it work and it's going to deliver something of value, then we will. But yeah, we would need to involve the warden in that conversation as well to get their, they know the role in that community far better.
Okay.
And the same response as I gave earlier in terms of your existing warden is, when you know whether that's a direction that you want to take, we'll have a conversation at that point about with that warden and with you about whether that particular person is brought back to your community, if you like, and then we backfill their role somewhere else in another way. And going right back to your first question, yes. £9,000 is the sum for a year for 1 day a week, in effect.
Just very quickly on that, I mean, the data again, have you got data? Because obviously the warden we had covered us and other areas, and they managed their time and their workload based on the need. So would you have data that you could provide us to say, as a parish, the data we collected suggests you would need a warden for X hours or X days? Because we for us to say, well, okay, we might look at affording 1 day a week, but was she doing 1 day a week previously, or was it 2 days a week? We haven't got that data because, as I say, they manage their own time across a shared set of parish councils. So that would be really helpful if that data is available to take towards to the parish council.
I don't know the answer to that question, Paula. I'm going to see if Shafiq knows the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Paula. Yeah, it'd be difficult with that data, I think, because with what we've had to do with the Warden service is we've put a case management system in place to capture the individuals that they're working with in the community, but that's only fairly recently that we've had that. So the wider work the wardens have done has been part of kind of a spreadsheet where they've collected information. So that ceased in effect to operate and when we introduced this new case management system. So there's a bit of a difficulty in translating the old figures to kind of new figures. And we'll have a look for you and see if there's anything that we can kind of help you to provide that evidence if you need it to have those discussions.
Yeah, it would be helpful because we could possibly potentially share a whole day across 2 parishes, across 2 areas. So each parish wouldn't have to cover the whole 9,000. We could do half each. So, but without having that data and knowing the need, it's a bit sort of pie.
Could you just do me a favour, Paula, and
Yes.
just drop us an email to that email address that we've put in the chat,
Okay.
just to ask for that, and we'll see what we can provide you to help those discussions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can you add me in as well? Thanks.
Yes.
Okay, if we go over to Alan next.
Hello, I'm in Kennington, a councillor in Kennington, which is an urban parish on the edge of Ashford. The sort of time per week you gave as a minimum was kind of sensible, would be 1 day. Do you have views on the duration? Does it need to be a full year? Could it be 6 months? The reason I ask this is we've been thinking for several years now. We've been talking about trying to get someone in who would review the sorts of clubs and societies that there are in Kennington and identify gaps. And that's what you were saying earlier. Mark was saying earlier is a role that your people have done, to identify gaps and then spend some time trying to get those groups off the ground if possible. And I don't have a fixed view on how long you would want someone to do that. We talked previously, without thinking of the wardens, of doing something which would be, say, for 6 months and then renewable for a further 6 months if you can see that there are achievements that are worth paying for, as it were. And I would just add as a comment, I think this idea of clustering makes sense, because if you've got people going all over the county and spending half their day travelling between one assignment and the next, that's going to be a waste of your resource and possibly a waste for us as sponsors.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. That's a really interesting question in terms of that kind of almost a relatively short-term task. All of our thinking currently is around how we can place a warden in a community, and that is a kind of our approach to that is that it's a kind of permanent arrangement until one or other side cancels it, basically. So we haven't really viewed it as a sort of short-term arrangement, sort of renewable after a period of time. Um, I would like to give that some thought, if I may. That's a really dreadful answer, and I appreciate that. But it's not a question I've been asked before. Shafiq, I don't know if you've got any thoughts in relation to that. It's almost like a kind of what I picked up is you're looking at a kind of almost like a task and finish role with a specific project in mind around your kind of club societies, whatever you want to call them in your community.
It potentially is, but clearly it depends how it evolves and if the person is doing other things and whether you then find that they're invaluable for what they're doing with members of the community as well as the community in general.
Yeah. Okay. Shafiq, did you have any thoughts in relation to that?
Yeah, I think not really helpful ones. I think probably like you, Mark, I'd like to go away and think about it. I think the difficulty for me as the head of service for the community wardens is the reason I know the community wardens are effective is because they know their communities and they're based in their communities. So undertaking a almost like a task and finish type role doesn't quite fit with the way they work and their expertise. It doesn't mean do it, and that's why I think we need to probably just take a step back and have a think about whether that's something that might work moving forward. When we did, and I just noticed, a lot of the conversations going back to the change in the model. When we did go out to the public consultation, there were a few key questions we did ask people about the warden's role, and then being based in communities was key, and having that understanding of communities. And so that is the one thing that we've retained kind of constant within that model moving forward.
Okay, maybe I'll email you and we can find out. I know we did have someone come to one of our councils when you were doing the review. I think it may have been Mark, actually. If you've got wardens operating in our area, then if we supplemented the time they spent here, it might work quite well for us and for you. So I'll drop you a line to ask you what level of warden representation there is currently within our community council area.
Yeah, I think that would be perfect. Thank you.
Thank
and yeah,
you.
we can pick up your question outside of the meeting if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dolly, I've sent you a message. Could you give me your email address within this chat and I'll get that response to you. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Do I not get to ask another?
Hello, thank you. I just wondered how long this possibility of joint working and sort of funding a community warden was going to run for. It's not something we can do right now, but it might potentially be something we wanted to do next year, calendar year.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Sarah. I mean, the whole model for the wardens, not the funding model, but the whole operational model, is designed to be scalable. So actually, if at any point a community decided that they wanted a warden in their area, then we would be very open to a conversation at that point. I can't sit here today and say, yeah, definitely in a year's time we'll be ready to help you. But I would like to think that we could have a sensible and positive conversation at that point, because as I say, the model is designed that we can add to it if the funding became available.
Yeah, just that there's historically for hundreds of years here, there was a chaplain who did a very similar role to the wardens. Then where the area is being redeveloped and restarted, obviously the warden covers a lot of what that chaplaincy role would be. So as it comes forward, there's a need both where this redevelopment's working, but also the community that we've got beside it. So it was, just to see if there was a future in it, because obviously I don't want to deviate too much, but obviously with devolution, will this still be open or do we need to have done it by May 26th?
Yeah, if I knew the answers to the devolution questions, I'd be a really popular man back in the office.
Yeah.
But and I simply don't. It's far too early a days in that conversation yet to know exactly what that means for any of the either the county or the district and borough services. But as regards the community warden model, yeah, it's designed to be forward-looking and to be able to be added to if resourcing becomes available from whatever source. So, if you reach that point in a year's time where you want to have that conversation, then please get in touch with us at that point, and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Go to Christine next.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm also, my broadband's not huge, so I'll stay on with my video closed if I may. One of the things that is really important in rural parishes, and people have touched on this already, is that £9,000 is a lot of money. Yeah. And we are already being challenged on our precepts because we have no relief. As Charmaine, you certainly know, there's no relief on the national insurance or on the thresholds, which has been a pretty devastating blow for our next year's budget. So proposing a community warden where quite a lot of the first expenditure would be in getting to know the community is quite a big ask for a rural community. And my take out of this is that certainly we would want to look at some clustering with neighbouring parishes who might have similar situations, and some of those we know very well, and come forward on that basis so that it would be across communities. I'm very aware that a few years back, it goes back some years now, we had PCSOs that knew the communities and knew particular families very well who work, and many of those families operate on quite a large geographical area, wider than one parish, and helping those families was an enormous benefit. And the local knowledge that the community warden would have could on that basis work on a cluster targeting the support for where it's really needed. But another thing for Mark and Shaflik to think about is whether you could, and I think perhaps the term upskilling is relevant in this context, upskill parish councillors to be able to know how to approach some of the issues that come across in the daily agenda, the weekly and monthly agendas of a parish council, where you've got particular situations where it's not a reference to the local council, the borough council housing department, who are in a landlord-tenant situation very often in some of these situations, but it's wider social care and knowing how to approach that. Because, of course, we don't have our vicars anymore. That kind of pastoral care doesn't exist anymore. So being able to almost mentor and be available to help, but definitely on the basis of knowing a community and knowing the kind of community as a cluster, whether that model is one that Mark and Shaflik could consider.
Thank you, Christine. That's there's a couple of fascinating things there for us to think about. I'm not going to come back and perhaps answer. I'm not quite sure what the question was in there, but there's some fascinating thoughts in that which we will definitely go away and think about. In terms of your last comment around sort of mentoring and being available to help, obviously that is the community warden role to some extent. That they do what they do in the community, but part of what they do is to help other people operate well in the community as well. So part of that is what the warden does. The clustering you've mentioned, and actually clustering has come up several times and actually features in the chat as well, I can see. And there is no doubt in my mind that parishes working together as a cluster is probably the most effective way forwards. But it's absolutely not for us to say to you what you need to do in that space. What I would say is we'd be really happy to engage with you around that kind of clustering. And if you're minded to explore it with any of your neighbours, then please involve us early. so that we can, help with that kind of art of the possible conversation that I mentioned earlier. The earlier that we can engage with you, probably the better the outcome will be at the end of it, because there won't be any kind of wasted effort in terms of spaces that may not be possible to achieve things. So I do think that clustering is a really important aspect, and my plea really is just to say, any of you that are considering that, please engage early with us, so that we can support those conversations and help sort of define what might be achieved.
Very helpful, thank you.
Right, we're coming to the end of the session, so we'll have to wrap this up quickly. But there is one comment in here, Mark and Shafiq, about how do you access, if you haven't got the funds to pay for a warden, so this is from Anya, how do we access the KCC sponsored warden scheme, and can the wardens be volunteers and not get paid? So I know there was the volunteer scheme. Is there anything that you could answer around that?
So I'm going to leave the volunteering bit to Shafiq, because he knows that bit far better than I do. There isn't the KCC sponsorship scheme. The KCC have put a certain amount of money into the warden service, and that's funded the wardens that we've got. So the 32 plus the 6 team leaders. So there's no additional funding to sponsor additional wardens from KCC. In terms of the volunteer aspect, Shafiq, can I hand that one over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, we did, as you know, Tom, we did have a volunteer warden scheme that we were operating previously. As part of the new model, we haven't continued that because of the costs associated with it. So it's no longer in existence. But that isn't to say that if there was a kind of possibility of looking at how that might work in communities, that we wouldn't revisit that moving forward. But we just don't have that capacity anymore with the staff that we've got in the service, unfortunately.
Okay. Dolly, have you got a legacy hand, or would you like to ask another question?
Oh, I'd like to ask.
Oh, you're breaking up, Dolly. Do you want to put it in the...
So I completely think that previous... Oh, why not? Why not? Don't you worry about it. Robust.
Dolly, your connection's not great. If you put your question in the chat, I can read it out for you. And if you can hear us okay, then we can get a response through. So I'll go to Anne, and then I'll come back to you once you put your question in the chat.
Hiya. I had a question. Is part of our rural community have got more needs towards knowing the Gypsy and Travellers community that knowing the settled community, because there might be more needs of communicating with them. Is it something that some of the actual wardens do, and whether there's any groups that have started thinking, yes, we'd like to cluster for having a community warden based mainly for Gypsy and Travellers community?
That's a very interesting perspective, and I'm not going to know any detail around that. Shafiq, is there anything you can help with on that one?
Yeah, again, I think that's a really fascinating point. So having a dedicated warden for Gypsy Traveller kind of communities, was that in essence what you were talking about? And yeah, so really interesting point. We don't have that. Obviously, we have wardens who work with Gypsy Traveller communities based in their areas, and some have more kind of expertise in doing that than others. But we also have a Gypsy Traveller unit within KCC, who potentially might be an option for us to look at as well, with them dedicating somebody to do that, because they've got far more skills in engaging with that kind of community than we have as a whole service. So that might be an option, Mark, for us to kind of take back and discuss with them. We know the head of the service there very well. So
yeah, it's a really fascinating idea, and thank you. We'll explore that with the existing KCC service and see whether there's something we can do to work together with them to support that community as well.
That'd be great, because so far when we have tried to get in touch, they say, well, they only work with the KCC approved site for Gypsy and Traveller and will not work in any other area. So it was kind of didn't know where to go in that particular respect. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not sitting there saying that I know where to go either, but we will have the conversations and see if there's something we can do.
Thank you.
All right, this will have to be the last question because we're running over a bit, but Dolly has come back and said, so why would parishes pick this model over, say, a Porchlight or Age UK community worker? And I think I would say that's a good question, and their choice. If they feel like that would be a better option, then absolutely it has to work for the community. Each community's unique, and that's what's so great about these wardens. So that choice is the community's choice. Would you like to add on that, Mark or Shafiq?
I would have said it pretty much exactly the same, Charmaine. The offer that we have put out in terms of if parishes and local councils want to sponsor the kind of community warden that we provide is just that. It's an offer. And if there is something that would suit your community better, then absolutely we are not standing here saying ours is better than something you know would be better for your community. So our offer is, as I say, just that, and it is for parishes and local councils to decide what's best for your community. And if they decide it is the kind of warden that we provide, then we would be very happy to have those kind of positive conversations about making it happen.
Okay, Dolly, you've put another question. I have got a document with other things that they do, so I can send that through to you so that you've got the full understanding of what the wardens are offering and what services that they're giving. Okay, well, I would just like to thank Mark and Shafiq for taking this session and for all the brilliant questions. I've learnt lots actually, questions I hadn't thought about asking, so it's really helpful for me. If you do have any questions, you can send them through to us. But if they are, if they're not something that we can help with, do go back to that email address that I've put in the chat, and go straight through to the team at KCC. And thank you all for coming. This recording will be put on the COUT website in the Knowledge Hub section of it. So if you did want to circulate it or refer other councillors to it, your clerks or anybody that hasn't been present, you will have the chance to watch it back again. And thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Charmaine. Yeah, thanks everyone for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Charmaine.
Thank you very much.